Good evening. My name is Jenny V. Jolson. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. I'd like to welcome you to our meeting this evening. So let's start with roll call.
Acosta?
Here.
Cammer?
Here.
Rodriguez?
Here.
Sarmiento? Tavares?
Here.
Jones?
Here.
Beach Olson?
Here. And Vice Chair Jones, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, please stand. Flag of the United States. Republic for which it stands.
Now we move on to oral communications. This is the time set aside in our meeting for members of the general public to address the Planning Commission on any item not on the agenda, which is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. No action or discussion shall be taken on any item presented, except that any commissioner may respond to statements made or questions asked, or may ask questions for clarification. All matters of an administrative nature will be referred to staff. All matters relating to Planning Commission will be noted in the minutes and may be scheduled for a discussion at a future meeting or referred to staff for clarification and report. Any commissioner may place matters brought up under oral communications on future agenda. All speakers are asked to approach the podium, fill out a card, and leave it at the podium. Please announce your name and address in order to obtain an accurate record for the minutes. I'd like to open it up for public communications. No, please just approach the podium and give your name and address for the minutes.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Haduka, resident of 26 Western Drive. I have some questions here. Maybe you can answer them today or at a later meeting. But anyway, question number one is, this has to do with number 1 Western Drive. And I would like to know, is there a valid permit that exists for that project there? And number 2, if the permit does not have, doesn't exist, does there have to be a re-approval by the Planning Commission and a vote? And if these questions can't be answered today, if they could be answered at another meeting and before the public viewers that would also like to know answers like this. Okay, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Menke. I reside at 35 9th, about 2 blocks from the proposed Hilton Hotel. I've been communicating on that project since 2015 when we first became aware of it. And I am notorious for saying I still haven't gotten answers to my questions, even though city staff say, well, we've answered those questions. And an example of what happens is I ask, where are the employees of that hotel going to park? There's no parking set aside for employees. And the planning department staff say, well, that's not our concern. Our concerns stop at the property boundary. That's another agency, maybe the police, maybe Public Works. So what I'm trying to set up is a way to have a question asked and answered so that everybody agrees, yes, that is a complete answer to that question. Still talking about parking, there was this parking study done for Wattsville, 2018, recent study. Well, they didn't include our neighborhood. Our neighborhood was rezoned to allow this large 5-story, 80-room hotel to be built in the neighborhood, and yet the planning people don't seem to consider it part of the downtown central commercial corridor. And I think we just need to set up some mechanism to identify and respond to questions that are out there. I'd certainly be glad to participate. I'd love to see somebody from the Planning Commission participate. And I think if we spent a little bit of time with everybody trying to resolve it, we'd actually get somewhere. But so far, it seems like we're spinning wheels, not making progress.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, I'm Greg Caput. I live at 7 Elton Way, which is about 2 blocks away. And the problem is the word went out that this was going to be on the agenda tonight, but it's not, so I'll speak now. The neighborhood, we're talking about an old plan that was approved by the city council about four years ago, and now there's a new plan from a different entity that is totally different than the old plan, and then they're trying to say that the approval of the old plan is an approval of the new one. That has a lot of legal issues, and that'll have to be cleared up in court. But what I want you to know is that this is a new plan for a big hotel on a small lot in the neighborhood. The neighborhood and the people that I've talked to are against the size of it, the whole parking structure with an underground parking, and it's too big for a small lot, is what we're saying. So if the neighborhood was going to have something like the Best Western, which is about another block away, that would be okay. But we're talking about a monster size hotel that's being proposed. So it's too big for a small lot, and it's also a separate plan that has to be looked at for you to look at, and also to vote either for it or against it. But it is a new plan. It's not, you can't use an old approval of a totally different plan for a new plan. Those are all legal issues, and that'll all come up later. So it's, when you're talking about neighborhoods, we're talking about certain pieces of property right next to the proposal that would be overshadowed by 2 stories. And also we're talking about severe traffic problems in that area. We're also talking about a school being nearby and a church being nearby, which is St. Patrick's and Moreland Notre Dame School. And this proposal calls for having also a bar and having a liquor license and all of that. So that's going to be within 1 block of Moreland Notre Dame School. So anyway, we're asking you to just make sure you look at the new plan and not just be fooled by somebody saying, hey, the old planning commission and the old city council approved an old plan, so here's this new one, it's already approved. You have to approve it, you have to look at it, and it will impact the neighborhood greatly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
My name is Marilyn Hyde. My address is 809 Vermont Street in Watsonville. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I am here representing my family that owns 2 lots bound by Western Drive, Alton Way, and Hyde Street. Our business is Hyde Park Apartments, and we are the immediate neighbors to the planned hotel project. Our property has been in our family since the 1920s, when the location of H.A. Hyde Nursery was there. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've gone to neighborhood meetings, planning commission meetings, city council meetings, and voiced opposition to a 4-story hotel project at 1 Western Drive. At one point, it was considered La Quinta, and now it's being talked about as Hilton. Each time, concerns of the neighbors were articulated about the misfit of a hotel to the residential area around it, height of the buildings, size of the project to the size of the lot, number of rooms, traffic and congestion, parking, and frank discussions about dog cleanup, among other things. And 90 neighbors signed a petition opposing the project, and many of them attended meetings in this room. The Planning Department and Commission, other city officials, and the City Council did not listen to our concerns, and despite our opposition, the project was approved. And here I am again. My family and I told you at that time that Mr. K.P. Patel was not a good next-door neighbor. We have experience. His property, considered an eyesore for 5 years or more, is even worse now. And I hope that if you don't know where that property site is, that you will please go by and look. The city police are very familiar with calls coming from there, and the fire department helped put out a fire in several rooms about 4 years ago, and the windows are still boarded up there. Mr. K.P. Patel has shown no interest in the safety and appearance of the property or goodwill to the city and the neighborhood, despite his plans for a 4-story hotel. Any permits or agreements for the hotel project should be long expired. We don't need a 4-story hotel monstrosity at this location. We do need property owners who care about their property in Watsonville. We also need leaders to address the current situation about this property location, and you on the Planning Commission can do something about the hotel project. So what are you going to do? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Patty Muldown. I live at 35 9th Street. On a note of what she was saying about the hotel being an eyesore, I had to call animal control because they were keeping small dogs in the swimming pool. And then I had to call mosquito abatement because they were keeping 4 feet of water in the swimming pool. So I run into mosquito abatement periodically because they kind of cruise our neighborhood. And he says he checks it every 2 weeks. So that's cost, I guess, to the county. I'm a member of Watsonville Neighbors. We're a new organization trying to get people to come here and talk about issues that are going on. When they originally planned this hotel, they got a CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. They got a CEQA, and it said non-deck, that there's not going to be any impact on anything. You know, they even said they weren't going to use any more water than what they're using now, going from 25 rooms to 80 rooms. And they also said they wouldn't impact us at all. And they said that there was going to be about 500 cars going in and out of our neighborhood a day. They were going to provide 80 parking spots for the 86 parking spots for the 80 rooms. And when I go to a hotel, a lot of times, you know, we have 2 cars. And then they had a 100-seat conference room, which is another 100 cars. And they were only providing parking for the first part. To me, that's an impact. I feel like that's going to be a really major impact on our neighborhood, because right now, we are very, very short on parking. If you go there, like this morning, I went out of my house, I'm retired, I looked in my neighborhood, there was a ton of parking. I thought, yeah, they must have done their parking study now, because at nighttime, when everybody comes home from work, everybody works, everybody's got 2 to 5 cars, because everybody's got kids and everybody works. So they go home, they go to work, they come back, and we struggle to park. A couple of years ago, we had a field that was on Quinn Alley that overflow parking would use. And we never really had problems with it, except trash from people walking through the neighborhood. They'd throw trash in the alley and in the green area. And a part of it had gravel on it, and we could get 12 cars there. There was 2 abandoned cars there, and they were there for at least 6 months. One of them might have been for a year. And we don't complain because we don't want to draw attention, because I'm quite certain that some of people in my neighborhood are not citizens, and so I don't want to make any waves at all. So nobody really called to have the cars taken. Finally, the cars were taken away, and we have a fence. They put a fence up. They didn't say anything to anybody. They just came and put a fence up, and now we have our alley that the garbage trucks can't get through anymore. And neither can the sewage guy that comes and cleans out the sewer, and neither can anybody get deliveries. Anyway, city planning, if you guys could look at that nice field and see if you could get it back for us, we really need it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is David Trevino, and I live in 15 Alton Way. Our family's been there for pretty close to 50 years. And one of the things that I see is the necessity for a hotel. I think there's one being built down the street over here, down the road, right by the beach there, a big old hotel. And I look down the street where I live, right down Main Street there, Freedom Boulevard. There's that tennis course, there's the church, and there's a hotel there that says no vacancy. There's no vacancy because you have these field workers living there. So I'm thinking, well, God, if we really need a hotel, why are they being rented out by these field workers here all the time? I mean, the people would be lined up to try to get there. So now we're going to be competing. That hotel there that they're thinking about building, 80 rooms, is going to be competing with the one right over here off the highway here. And what's going to draw them to Watsonville? I said, what draws them to Watsonville? Goodwill. You're going to go shopping at Goodwill, and that's why you need a hotel here. I just don't see the need. And my fear is, after the newness wears out, it's going to be 80 rooms there to be rented out to migrant workers. And if you don't believe me, drive by over there, you'll see no vacancy right there on the left-hand side. Then about 5 o'clock, you see these food trucks come in, and you see all these guys, or look on the weekend, you see all these guys going to the laundromat and stuff. So if there was a need, I'd say fine. I think there might be a need, 2 stories would be fine, just like you were saying, the one down the street. But other than that, I personally think it's overkill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Holford. I live at 614 Achery Court. I live in the senior village. I visit in the area by that hotel. I bring my husband, who is disabled with Parkinson's disease and uses a walker. I'm still upset about the lack of parking. There's no access for people with disabilities. It's very difficult to get in and out of the neighborhood. And I can't imagine adding all that 500 cars per day traffic into that little tiny community with only one entrance in. And it's a signal to get into that area. And the way it is now is scary. And I can't imagine if we put a hotel there with cars coming and going all day long in that small space, that it's going to seriously impinge on minimally our mobility visiting. But I know there's people with disabilities that live there already. It's not just visitors. And the taking away of the parking across the back and making it one way makes it exceedingly difficult to get into the 9th Street area and to get up and around. And there's a lot of children, which is wonderful. Our world needs children. And yet it's dangerous because it's difficult for them to get into that area to play. There's no things for them to play on, so of course they play in the streets. And then you have people like me driving in and my husband in his walker trying to get in and out. And I really think that you should be looking more closely at the impact on the environment, including the people. We actually are part of the environment. It's not just the water and the air. The people that live there have needs. And it doesn't seem to be in good conscience on your part, if you have any say over the parking and the traffic, I know you have some say over the building, that would not be noticed. It's going to have a profound impact on that little neighborhood. And I agree that a lot of the people there are very hard workers. The parking problem begins about 5:15 at nighttime. And they're people that contribute to our community, but often do not have a voice because it's dangerous for them to have a voice in these times. And to me, you represent all of us. You represent them as well as those of us who vote and have citizenship and have the right color skin to have those resources and have access to that. And those people there work hard enough and pay into our system taxes and Social Security enough to protect the rest of you out there. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Jean Haduka, 26 Western Drive. I live catty-corner to where the hotel's going to be. Initially, when we heard about this, it was not zoned for it. It was to pass until we brought up the question, how can you okay a project that is not zoned for that area specifically? So they zoned it for it, told me stuff about, well, the downtown's here and this, so that happened. So lack of transparency has been our main problem. I did not even know this project was going on and had been redone again. And now I find out that permits, but the structure, the project itself is different. You're talking about no longer lifts for parking. You're talking about having 2 layers of parking. As people said, I believe the count of the rooms have gone up from 75 to 80. And I don't know if they resubmitted structural or plans for it that will show you if it can hold such a structure there, since it is in a water tends to seep through. And if I remember right, they were going to do a for drainage in the backside between things, and it isn't even, I believe they said it isn't even viable to do that type of swell, I think they call it, there. So it's the transparency that is mainly bother to us, that we don't get information when we go to ask for information. As my husband did before, you have a plan that has no measurements on it. And we're told, well, I can scale it for you. And I'm going, who does that? If you don't know what's there and the measurements, how can you okay things? So mainly, I don't know what's going on. And that's it. I don't know if a new permit had to be thing and you had to go through and structurally say that it can handle such weight on it, at this what they want to do or not. And everything, entrances have changed, things have changed just by the picture. I can only go by the picture that was printed. Otherwise, I don't know. And like I said, I don't know if it's worth going down to the planning commission, the planning department to ask questions, because we don't get the answers. And that's our main problem, transparency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission and staff. My name is Victor Morani. I'm with Wattsville Neighbors. I want to personally thank Santa Claus for coming tonight. Thank you, Santa, for showing up. You may recall I appeared in front of you in July with other members of our group and the community in strong support of a new dialysis treatment center that you approved to be built in Wattsville. So again, thank you for doing that for our community. Wattsville Neighbors also wants to thank the Parronian for running some recent news articles that shone a new light on this proposed project on Western Drive. It's clear there's been a series of miscommunications on this particular topic for a while now, basically between the city officials and the local neighborhood community. To quote a good friend of mine on this particular hotel, it's a case if you're not confused, you're not paying attention. It's been a situation where there's a series of new plans, but no changes to the process. Generally, when you make major changes to something, you have to go back through the process, and which requires you good folks to be involved, just like you were before. But in looking at the smiling faces sitting up here, I don't know if many of you, certainly not a majority of you, were sitting here years ago when the original plan, when it was a La Quinta, was approved, which was a totally different project. I had the opportunity to review the file a few weeks ago, look at it objectively, and I discovered what I appeared to be some irregularities in the file. I think it's worth looking at. I think you should use your oversight ability as the Planning Commission I know these neighbors discussed not going to the city council first. They would have preferred to come on October 1st, but your meeting was abruptly canceled without a lot of notice. So they had no choice but to go on the 8th and the 22nd to the city council. I know there's been a series of letters in the newspaper, open letters to the city manager and others to get answers. Apparently those answers weren't given or haven't been properly vetted with people. I would recommend, for whatever it's worth, that you exercise some of your oversight ability and checks and balances as appointed officials of the city and have a special meeting where you have people have an opportunity to come and look at this issue once and for all and decide whether or not it is worthy. It seems to me that the permit has expired, and there's some questions as to whether or not even that original permit is still valid. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the public?
Buenas noches, yo no hablo inglés, pero yo no vengo acerca del hotel, yo vengo acerca del bill del agua, que cada año ya lo están subiendo entre más. Y no es justo que estén subiendo el 14%, más 25% cada año, cuando viven dos personas y que son $200 por mes, se me hace bastante dinero. Entonces, esa es mi preocupación. Eso es a lo que yo vengo. Yo vengo porque el bill del agua lo están subiendo cada mes o cada que se les antoja, yo creo, porque ya son casi $200 por mes y vivimos dos personas ancianas ya, viejitas, y cómo es justo que todo lo que quieran recaudar, quieren aumentar en el bill del agua. Se me hace mucho a mí. Y pues uno trabajó en el field, como dice ahí en los campos, que no agarra uno casi una gran pensión, agarran casi una miserita, pues porque yo cuando dejé de trabajar ganaba $7 la hora. ¿Se imaginan cuál es mi pensión que me dan? Entonces no es justo que no alcanza uno a vivir con eso que le dan y pagar esos biles tan grandes. Eso es todo, gracias. Luz María González. Es 447 Rogi, y tengo 40 años viviendo ahí, 43, algo así, y por eso digo que es mucho.
Good evening. She said, my name is Maria, and she is not here to speak on the hotel. She said she's here tonight to speak on the water bill. She's very concerned because the water bill keeps rising. It seems almost to go up about 40% or so. It just seems like it's going up every year. For her, living in a home with only two people and paying about $200 a month just seems very high. It's just too much money. That's a big concern for her, that the fact that the water bill keeps rising. In her years working, she worked in the fields where she didn't have a lot of income, so, talking about maybe $7 an hour. Therefore, her pension is much lower than the bills that she needs to pay. So she's here to express her concern. She lived on Rogue Street for about 43 years, and that's why she came tonight.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Sylvia Castillo. Mi dirección es 439 por la Rogue Street, aquí en Watsonville, California. Yo también tengo ahí ya viviendo 10 años, anteriormente en otras direcciones. Y mi motivo de la conversación es el mismo de mi vecina. Nos aumentan cada vez el bill. A veces es como dice ella, casi $200 para una familia. A veces también sí es demasiado. Y a veces un bill llega igual, al otro mes me llega exactamente en dólares y centavos igualito. Un día llamé aquí a la ciudad para preguntar por qué el bill estaba llegando igual. Y le dije, ya pusieron un plan de cobrar lo mismo cada mes. Me dice, ya no, le digo, pues se me hace raro que el mes pasado pagué lo mismo que me estás cobrando ahorita. Dice, pues no sé por qué, y el bill ya nomás empezó a aumentar, pues si no baja, y es que es demasiado lo que nos están cobrando, para, como dice mi vecina, lo aumenten cada que tienen un presupuesto, pues deberían de considerar eso, porque todos somos familias que trabajamos para vivir y pagar nuestros impuestos, porque todos pagamos nuestros impuestos y estamos al corriente de todo. Muchas gracias.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Castillo. I also live at Rogue Street. I've been there for about 10 years, also in other residences here in Watsonville. I'm also here, as my neighbor just spoke, in regards to the water bill. I'm also concerned because it keeps going up. For me, $200 a month for my family to pay for water just seems way too much. And what also concerns me is that there's many times that the bill is exactly the same to the dollars and cents. I actually went down to the city to ask why the bill was exactly the same in some months. I asked if they have a plan that they're charging the same, and I was told that no, there is no plan for that. But I've never got an answer to why the bill keeps going up. And I'm very concerned. You know, we pay taxes, we work hard. We just don't feel like this is fair.
I just want to jump in. For those concerned about water rates, the Planning Commission does not have any jurisdiction over the public utilities or public works. So I encourage you to attend one of the city council meetings, and this is city council that has authority over the water bill for the city. Yeah, or you can call customer service as well.
Any other members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission this evening? Okay, seeing none, I will bring it back to the commissioners. Any of the planning commissioners have oral communications, now would be the time to share.
Oral communications or conversations about what we've just heard.
You may ask clarifying questions.
Okay, so a couple of things in the purview of the planning department or the planning commission. So when was this project originally and the permits originally approved?
Proper zoning.
Okay.
And so do we know if the permits are still active?
So I'm actually going to step in here and say that I know that this is coming up for the next council meeting, and they will be taking the matter up. And so I think that we should table this for now and allow them to take it up at that time.
What I can say is the project was approved somewhere around 2016, 2017. There was a minor modification made in 2017. The building permit is ready to issue for this project, so it has been entitled. It has a current permit on it. We're waiting for a contractor to be assigned to the project so we can issue the building permits. We have had council members ask for clarification from staff, and we will be following up with the council members on that. And if you'd like, we can come back to a future planning commission meeting and give you a full report of the history on this as well.
Tabling it right now? I don't know about this. I'd like to ask Greg a question. Is that fine? He'd made some comments, and I have a question for him with regards to the comments he made.
You could ask him for further comments if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
wish to.
further comments. That's all I want. Please. Thanks, Greg. So, as I'm new to the Planning Commission, I really don't know what happened at that time. So my question to you is, you had made a comment from old to new.
Right.
From you had said, we're in 2019, you said 4 years ago, so I heard that it started in 2015. What was the dramatic change that occurred?
Well, the old approval was on an old plan, and that was La Quinta was the proposal.
Yep.
And they pulled out. So that the shelf life on that approval ran out about 2 to 3 years ago. You can't bring up an old approval of a plan and say, look, this old plan that expired is now okay now, and we're going to give it to the Planning Commission for you to stamp it and say it's okay. Now we have a new proposal that's it's different, but it's still too big for the small lot. And the neighbors would like to see something that would fit in with the neighborhood, more like a two-story Best Western, which is right there across the street, with a 20-foot, pretty much a 20-foot maximum height. And then it would not tower over the entire neighborhood. So this new proposal has to go through public meetings for you to look at, for you to decide. It's a totally different proposal. So
that's kind of a segue into my next question with regards to, you mentioned new, I heard Hilton. So are you saying that that's the new proposal? Was that ever brought to the Planning Commission?
And that needs to be brought to you and have you look at everything.
Okay.
Was that the
So that's kind of my point. I was really listening to everyone from, Marilyn, David, Susan, all of you that came up to speak, and that's kind of what I got out of this.
I believe the whole Planning Commission has changed since the old one was approved.
Well, I'm new, and I'm appointed. I'm here to serve, so.
Yeah. So was this the minor change that you talked about, Susie?
Yeah, in late 2017, early 2018, a minor modification was approved for minor exterior design, and then addition of parking, addition of a couple more rooms, which was eligible for a minor modification, which was approved by the zoning administrator at the time.
But that's something that should have been brought to the Planning Commission.
No.
No, that's minor.
Per our municipal code, it was not required to go to public hearing. So after that, the property owner then submitted building permit application to the Community Development Department. It's been going through the building permit review process for the last year and a half, and that building permit is ready to be issued at this point.
And I think all the legal issues, Alan Smith would, have to deal with that. But there's a lot of legal issues. Anyway, that'll be for you to look at.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks. Ed.
So can we make sure that this hits our agenda for December?
We can have a follow-up report, I believe.
Yeah, we can provide a timeline for you, but just, it's an entitled project. There's nothing that the city at this point can do.
Can we make a motion to include all?
No, we cannot. We're not doing that right now. It's not within this is simply communications.
Well, it does say that we can ask for clarification, and we may place matters brought up under oral communications on a future agenda.
So that
We
that was
asked
going
for
to.
the follow-up report, which would be on the future agenda, but we're not making motions right now.
Okay, so long as it gets on our future agenda, that's what I would like to see and hear from. I'm not, the chair is.
You may come down to the podium.
Sorry, Susan Holford, 614 Ager Court. I'm not sure that Mr. Acosta realizes the newspaper article said that the building was going to be starting in 90 days. So it's like what she's saying is that it's over and done, and you didn't get to say your say.
Well, I think that's why I'm asking the questions right now. Again, and I will say that we all have to be mindful as community servants, as that's what we're here to do, to serve our community.
I think a lot of the people that have been coming here feel as though they have not been heard over and over again. And a minor modification to you feels quite major to those people who live there.
So let me just summarize what I think where we are. We have a project that was approved by the Planning Commission, City Council several years ago. There was a minor modification of it that the owner, developer, it's my understanding, is about ready to pull a building permit on it. That would mean that the design work has been done, that engineering has been done, that there's a contract with Hilton that's been signed, because they can't get a loan to build it unless Hilton says that they'll run it. And it would be a problem for the city legally at this stage to say, no, what that Planning Commission did 3 years ago or 4 years ago, or the council did 3 or 4 years ago, we want to change that. That's the difficulty you run into. However, I do think it's completely appropriate, and staff has agreed to come back with a report of what events have occurred. The traffic study way back in the day, the mitigated neg deck with the conditions on environmental review, the zoning changes, the design review, et cetera, and staff can come back and explain that. And I think that would be illustrative for the commission, because that's what you folks do on a regular basis, is you approve those things, and it would be useful for you to know what happens after you approve them. But it would be an issue, clearly would be an issue at this stage for the council or the commission to seek to modify or revoke a valid and enforceable permits, because you've approved them and the developer has moved forward with those in reliance on the fact that the developer thinks that they're going to be able to build something.
Alan, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, because I want to stay right where what Alan just said. You had mentioned minor change. This is not a minor change. Alan, you can't, hold on, let me finish. You go from a Marriott to a what? Hilton. Oh, you can't go Hilton, because that'd be roughly about the same, right? Ritz-Carlton, it's not the same. The footprint's not the same. This is before my time. So the other thing is transparency on this. I don't see transparency. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm not the planner in this, and so I'm not trying to get into the weeds, the details of it. My understanding of the minor change, other than what Director Merriam said, is a facade change, because you're correct. Howard Johnson's, any of these certain tiers of motels have certain motif changes. They want parapets here and things there. It doesn't necessarily mean, in my limited understanding, and it's limited, that there is a room change or any other major structural changes when there's a facade change. But again, that would be something that would be appropriate to bring back to the Planning Commission and explain. I'm not qualified to speak to it. and I don't have the expertise or the specific knowledge in this project to speak to it. I'm just explaining generally what happens is that projects get approved, the developer goes out and seeks the things they need, the loans, the contractors, the operators, all those people to implement what they got a permit for. That's my understanding of what is going on here. Now, again, I'm all in favor of transparency, the public meetings, the planning commission, the city council, et cetera, et cetera. But why don't we come back with that at the next meeting and have an explanation of that? I don't know if that would be satisfactory or not, but that's, to me, to have a special meeting to seek to modify something that's at this stage of the development process would be a significant issue.
Well, I think that, again, my concern would be that this was one of the comments you just made, was not really knowing about it. And we're kind of just moving forward with it.
Well, again, I don't know this project that well, but that's would be typically what happens is that when a project's approved, I don't think staff comes back and reports on it. This may be an exception to the rule because it's a large project, but I'll defer to the planning director about how reports are made back to you on status of projects.
If I could just add one last thing, and I'll shut up. So, I think one thing would be, at least for me, would be helpful going forward, putting together a pipeline for the Planning Commission so we could see what's going on in the future. So we're not.
We actually do. She gives us a report as the
forward,
secretary.
Yeah.
And so she tells us what's coming up, and at any time we're allowed to reach out to her. And
How
so
far out?
Several months. Usually.
In detail?
If you reach out to her one-on-one, she's happy to talk through agenda items with you. I've done it on several occasions.
Okay.
Well, and I think, hang on one second. I think the biggest thing that concerns me is a couple of terms were used: miscommunications and irregularities. And I think we're just trying to make sure that, look, we serve at the pleasure of our city council member who appointed us, who serves at the pleasure of you. And I want you to know you were heard, and we will all be reporting back to our individual city council members, I'm sure. And at their next meeting, I'm sure this is going to be an informative topic.
You may approach the podium.
They did a CEQA on the hotel and said there would be no environmental impact. As my sister said, we're an environment, and we really think we're going to be impacted. They're going to do another development on Main Street by Auto Circle, and they're in the middle of doing a CEQA there where they're going to ask, or they're going to say it's not going to impact the environment. I think that's a lie. And I think that this hotel is based on lies. You said they did a traffic study. They didn't do a traffic study in our neighborhood. Come to our neighborhood, please. I'll give you tomatoes. Check out and see what it is. We are already horrible with traffic and with parking. And it's just going to be, and you can't get out. That's the only exit, right in front of the hotel. Right now, sometimes you wait 10 minutes just to get off a Hyde Street.
Thank you.
It seems to be a practice and a pattern of not being transparent when we ask questions. I've been in construction for 40 years, okay? I've worked on a 19-story civic center in downtown San Jose. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. Somebody mentioned it was a year and a half for a change order or just cosmetic. That seems like a long time. A lot of cities, they give courtesy change orders for extending the size of a room or switching something cosmetically. It doesn't take a year and a half of planning to determine stuff like that. So I was just wondering, the big problem here is that from what we gathered, the design change is going to be, they're going to eliminate the elevators to park these cars, to double stack them down below, so that they eliminate half of those cars. That's only place 40 spots to park. Where's the other 40 going to park? Well, we were told that they were going to have another level below that for parking, so that's 2 underground levels, not in 1, but 2. And that seems to where there's not been any clarification. That is a major design change, not this cosmetic stuff. So if somebody could answer that question, I think it would alleviate a lot of problems down the line. But I know you're not here to answer questions because you have to go through the chain of command. But anyway, that seems to be a big problem right now, is there's that non-transparent, is there going to be another level added? That's basically what I'm saying. It's just, is this a practice that we got to keep on going, a practice and pattern that's going to go when we ask questions like the last time? So anyway, that's another question there that you might want to consider.
Thank you.
Reminded that the regulations right now require for a motel, they have a parking spot for every room plus 5 additional parking spots. It doesn't depend on how big the motel is. So if you got a 20 room, you need 5 additional spots. 50 room, 5 additional spots. 200 rooms, 5. So what happens here, this plan for One Western to Hilton meets the requirements. They've got 5 additional spots, but those 5 spots just aren't going to do the job because you got 20 to 25 employees. Where do they park? You got people coming to attend meetings. Where do they park? And so I think you need to go back and look at your regulations and modify it so that when you have a larger facility like this, you get more parking. They need more parking. There's a different kind of hotel. I think it has to do with assisted living, but they've got to have 1 parking spot for every 2 employees, but nothing for the Hilton's 25 employees, no requirements.
Thank you. One question.
I come from working for counties and the State Center Community College District in Fresno. And we had, when you had to make a change with the plan, if you're going to label it minor, it had to be equal to $20,000 or less. If it was more than $20,000, then you had to bring it up to ADA standards. And so that was $20,000 was the classification for a minor change, okay? So I wonder, is there some criteria that the director has where minor equals a certain amount of money? And then there's actually like, a decision is made, well, that's only a minor change because it's less than, $100,000 or $500,000 or whatever minor is considered for a hotel. I have no idea on the money. But you see what I'm saying? Because maybe minor, maybe this meets the criteria for minor. It's a facade change. Building another entire layer for parking. I remember 10 years ago at the college, that was $7,000 a spot to make an underground parking lot. So if we're going to be, that's not minor. But maybe, I'm not sure, is there a criteria for minor versus major in terms of changing a project?
Answer that quickly. There is a specific criteria in the municipal code, and it does not have to do with monetary issues.
Any other comments from commissioners? You're welcome. Thank you for attending this evening. So we've asked for a report for a future agenda item. And with that, I think I'm going to move on to oral communications from planning commissioners. Do any of my fellow commissioners would like to address the public? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our oral presentation on planning history timeline. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just have a quick announcement. I first want to thank everyone for coming out. I think I learned a lot today, and it was really nice to hear from you guys, and I look forward to that report back and putting that on our future agenda. And I also want to invite everyone to the Digital Nest is turning 5 on Sunday, and we are opening our doors to anyone in the community to come celebrate with us and enjoy some good food and just the work that's been happening there. So I want to extend the invite to all the commissioners and all our community members and families.
Thank you.
What time on Sunday?
It'll be from 4 to 6. At Digital Nest here on Union Street.
Okay. Oh, I have one announcement. The holidays are coming, everyone, and Holiday in the Plaza is Sunday, November 24th, starting at 1 p.m. There will be snow and the Christmas train or the holiday train, and I believe at 5 p.m. the tree lighting with Santa. So he will be making another appearance in a few short weeks. So it's a family-friendly event, so please come on out to the downtown plaza and enjoy the start of the holiday season. Okay, now I think we're ready for our presentation on planning history timeline.
Good evening, planning commissioners, members of the public. I'm Justin Meek, principal planner for the city of Watsonville. Part of the reason why we thought we'd give this presentation because we didn't have any agenda items, for one. But also, October just happens to be National Community Planning Month. And so some of you might be aware we got a proclamation from the mayor during October. I thought this would be an opportunity also to provide an opportunity to share about planning history, perhaps answer a few questions, and segue into more recent legislation that all of you should be aware of. So with that introduction, development has always been a topic of concern. Housing in particular, overcrowding, which I'll further discuss later on in this meeting, has been a topic of interest for many, and of course, various concerns. In 2001, the New York State Tenement Housing Act, or the new tenement law, was a type of housing reform. Its aim was to improve living conditions in New York City's tenement buildings. And if you recall, tenement is defined as something that a building where 3 or more families lived, but oftentimes was conflated with to mean housing for the poor that lacked proper amenities. This new law in the early 20th century set requirements for new buildings to improve light and air quality. And they did this by having requirements, for example, having external facing windows for each room. You can now think in terms of building codes, right? An open courtyard, improved ventilation, indoor toilets, and better fire safety. Up until that point, these were not requirements for new buildings. You'll see in the slides that, in the subsequent slides, the issues of congestion dominated reform efforts of the day. And I just provide this map because part of the planning or analysis done at the day. The map on the top shows densities of population. As you can see, the low to high densities in New York. Interestingly enough, they also did a distribution of nationalities in sanitary districts as well. So I'm not sure the purpose of the bottom map. At least I don't want to know fully, to be honest. But the top one clearly shows the amount of people, and it raised concerns about sanitation and public health. Around that same time, and as many of you may remember from your civics class, that a Frenchman by the name of Letchworth designed our nation's capital. Letchworth designed the city from scratch, envisioned a grand capital of wide avenues, public squares, and inspiring buildings in what was then a district of hills, forests, marshes, and plantations. In 1902, the Macmillan Plan was prepared to revive and update L'Enfant's Plan for Washington, D.C. It represents a landmark comprehensive planning document. The Macmillan Plan focused on the city's parks and monuments. It redesigned the National Mall and determined the locations of the Lincoln Memorial, Grant Memorial, Union Station, among others. The Macmillan Plan is still the basis for most of Washington, D.C.'s planning and helped boost the career of a certain individual called Daniel Burnham, who worked on the plan. It can be considered the first real expression in the United States of the City Beautiful movement, which emphasized grandeur and beautification in planning. As this presentation is to our city's planning commission, I thought I'd share the first precursor to establishing formally such a body. A board of city planning for Ohio cities was formed in 1902. You'll note that, among others, Daniel Burnham was appointed to this board, which was referred to as the Group Plan Commission for Cleveland. Although technically not a city planning commission, this group essentially acted like one, with the power to give advice for many broad planning improvements in the city. You may have heard of a certain Ebenezer Howard's book, Garden Cities of Tomorrow. First published in 1898, this book offered a vision of towns free of slums and enjoying the benefits of both town, such as opportunity, amusement, and good wages, and country, such as beauty, fresh air, and low rents. The first garden city, based on the principles of Ebenezer Howard, is Letchworth, England, which began construction in 1903. The Garden City movement focused on creating self-contained communities with residents, industry, and agriculture surrounded by undeveloped green areas. These planned communities inspired the similar New Town movement in the United States. Here's just an image showing what this community looks like. The first planned garden suburb in the United States is Forest Hills Gardens. The design included providing mixed-income housing surrounded by green space. Another key figure you may know is Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. He planned this community. Although the community showed the possibility for building affordability for a range of incomes, it has become a victim of its own popularity, eventually becoming one of the highest price enclaves in Queens, New York. Back in the city center of New York City was ongoing efforts to address overcrowding. Social reformers such as Florence Kelley and Mary Simkovich founded the Committee of Congestion of Population in New York to look at solutions for overcrowding in poor parts of the city. The Reform Coalition recruited from more than 24 organizations and had a broad focus, but its first project was the New York Congestion exhibit of 1908. This exhibit began at the Museum of Natural History in New York City. The event was organized by social reformers who believed that urban congestion was the primary cause of problems with housing, child labor, and poverty. After 3 weeks at the museum, the exhibit toured around the country, gradually pushing city administrators to launch commissions to look into congestion in their communities. You may have asked yourself, when and where was the first planning commission? Hartford, Connecticut, it turns out, in 1907. This was the first city in the United States with an official and permanent city planning commission. Prior to this, planning commissions were generally disbanded once a plan had been developed. Around the same time was the first college course in city planning. In 1909, Harvard College introduced the principles of city planning through its landscape architecture department. Two more firsts. The university also was the first to launch programs in city and regional planning in 1923 and urban design in 1960. These planning efforts were a precursor to, another first. The Plan of Chicago represents the first comprehensive metropolitan plan written by Daniel Burnham, I mentioned before, and Edward Bennett. It was based on 3 years of research into how city growth and infrastructure impacted its residents. The plan concentrated on physical improvements, such as new parks, lakefront upgrades, new civic and cultural centers, and transportation development. The Burnham Plan remains highly influential to the philosophy and process of planning cities. And here are a few of the illustrations and maps from the plan and what it showed. These planning efforts were a precursor to zoning. Legislatures in New York, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois separately allowed some cities to create residential districts where no manufacturing or commercial establishments could operate. Although the governor of Illinois vetoed the act at the state, the moves were now seen as early version of zoning. Enabling legislation would come later in a few years. I would be remiss to not mention another individual. Among the many key figures in the urban planning field is Scottish sociologist Sir Patrick Geddes. Actually, I think it's Geddes. I'm sorry. In any event, his vision is the best, right? He published a book called City and Evolution in 1915. Like many in his day, Geddes' ideas revolved around improving communities and preventing congestion. Unlike others, he did not push for sweeping monolithic plans. Rather, as you can see in this graphic, his ideas are better represented by a transect. He was also one of the first to promote using the scientific method and civic surveys. Geddes was a major influence on other plannings, including the preeminent Lewis Mumford. The first zoning code occurred in New York City. The 1916 zoning resolution was written as a response to concerns about overdevelopment. The resolution divided the city into zones based on the primary activity in that area and created building height and setback guidelines for each zone. All the while, the United States was becoming more urban. The 1920 U.S. Census was the first to report that more than half of the nation's population was living in urban areas. Previously, it was mostly rural. And finally, an important draft of the Zoning Enabling Act was prepared a few years later in 1922. This model law was developed by the U.S. Department of Commerce to help states create zoning restrictions in their jurisdictions. This draft contained important language defining a zoning commission and calling for a plan for zoning regulations. This was followed by the 1927 by a standard City Planning Enabling Act to help states understand the organization and powers of city and regional planning commissions, the making of city and regional plans, and controlling the layout of new subdivisions. These acts still provide the institutional structure for planning and zoning in many states. Now, this is where I will end my planning history timeline presentation. However, in the years that followed, there were many key events, legislation, and figures. And if you care, I could come back and provide more information on any number of these topics. But I'll just in very brief note that, as you can see in the 1920s, there was further legislation and court cases that established zoning, followed by a number of public works activities in the 1930s during the Great Depression, including redlining maps and resettling. Some first housing acts started in the 1930s and continued in the 40s. A key event, of course, in the 40s and then continued in the 50s are places like Levittown, where you had production-style development. In the 50s, again, more housing acts and trying to address urban growth boundaries, followed by a number of key books and everything from Kevin Lynch looking at how to understand a community and plan out a city, to Jane Jacobs, who was a response to Robert Moses in New York, to advocacy planning, which is where a very influential book by Paul Davidoff was prepared. Obviously, civil rights and housing became more of an issue in the 1960s, and ways to provide fair housing, HUD Act. Environmental concerns were reflected in the 1970s with the passage of NEPA, the creation of the EPA. Further issues about dealing with affordable housing with a CBDG program established, and then in the 70s continuing that with Reinvestment Act and, again, other types of legislation. By the 1980s, things shifted. There was a drive for new urbanism, basically building things like in the old days, where it was more walkable and less auto-oriented. At the same time, with legislation and the change in climate in Washington, we looked to tax credits as a way to incentivize low-income housing, which is also informed in the 90s with the Hope 6 program, again to help revamp public housing projects. And there was even some autonomous car testing done at the time. 2000s, one of the key things, the Disaster Mitigation Act. I note that because we're in the process of preparing a local hazard mitigation plan per that act. Other very key books that came out of that era include Richard Florida's The Rise of the Creative Class, and of course Donald Shoup's The High Cost of Free Parking, some key court cases on takings. And then moving into this decade, for the first time, cities started to grow faster than the suburbs. This is particularly the case in places like Boston and other East Coast cities, whereas in the past you saw people moving out of the cities. You started seeing people coming back. And, of course, part of this whole conversation is self-driving cars and what that's going to mean to our circulation network and perhaps parking as well. I'd like to segue into looking at providing a housing update. And then if time permitting, if you're still with me, I can give you a brief overview on the downtown Watsonville civic plan. So we talked about the old, and now we're bringing it to the new and current events. Some recent legislation that the state legislature has passed that you should know about involves streamlining, increasing density, and reducing barriers in general for housing production, as well as, in particular, ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Beginning with the former, there's the Housing Crisis Act, or SB 330, that was introduced by legislator Skinner. It has a number of things that are important, one of which is that for certain types of projects, the city has only one opportunity to identify incomplete items, which means that there's basically only one bite at the apple, and we'll see what implications that has for, again, certain types of affordable housing projects moving forward. And there's also a limit on the number of hearings, and this is largely intended to address in some jurisdictions, San Francisco, Berkeley, they would have more than 5 hearings, to say the least, when dealing with controversial infill housing projects. Also, another key provision is that cities are no longer able to downzone residential properties so as to reduce the amount of density or the number of units that could be built. Interestingly enough, a number of the provisions will sunset, however, in 2025. So we'll track that. Another key law, AB 1763, involves density bonus. It revises the density bonus law to allow, instead of 35%, an 80% density bonus for a 100% affordable housing project that involves no more than 20% moderate income and at least 80% lower income units. In terms of ADUs, AB 68 and AB 881 involves called the processing timelines, ordinance prohibitions, and triplexes, change how agencies may regulate ADUs. First, we have only 60 days to be able to approve or deny an ADU project. It also prohibits local jurisdictions to have ordinances that impose minimum lot size, minimum open space requirements, and we can also not require replacement parking for, say, a garage conversion. Further, this project, in essence, establishes new regulations that allow ADUs to have a floor area of up to 800 square feet. It reduces setbacks to allowing them to a 4-foot rear and side yard setbacks. And that further, it's being called the triplexation of single-family zoning in the sense that single-family residents can have an ADU and a junior ADU within the same building. There are also provisions that allow multiple ADUs on multifamily dwellings. Another bill, AB 670, limits HOAs on how they can restrict ADUs. So it prevents CCNRs, or it prevents HOAs to have a condition that prohibits or unreasonably restricts the construction of an ADU on a single-family residential lot. So that is now considered illegal. Generally speaking, these fall into what are being referred to as the 3 Ps: housing production, protection, and preservation. And what you'll see is a model where the state legislature is moving housing development to be more by right and less discretion at the local level. Let me just pause and see if you have any questions. And if you like, I can then transition and move on to the downtown specific plan that's currently underway. All right, I just want to bring to your attention that not only is it underway, but we had stakeholder interviews in September on 2 days, and then our first advisory committee on September 25th. And this is just a brief summary of what the agenda was for that advisory committee, what their purpose is, and to go over, in particular, the public participation plan and brainstorm how we can get more participation from the general public and identify then key issues and opportunities that the plan will want to address. Here's a graphic showing the team. It's a big team. Matt Remy & Associates, based out of, it's a boutique firm out of Berkeley, has put together a number of sub-consultants to address everything from the environment through CEQA, additional planning efforts from Sargent Town Planning. We have civil engineers. We have specialized traffic consultants in the form of Nelson Nygaard, a local traffic consultant in the form of Keith Higgins, and of course EPS provided market analysis to understand the developability of the plan. The general approach is outlined in this graphic, showing we're first looking at existing conditions, then we'll be talking about the vision for what we want downtown to become, create some alternatives, which will then be evaluated in the IR. And then finally, last but not least, plan adoption going before your body with a recommendation to council. There's a number of key objectives. You know, one of the main things that our understanding was, and this was also a way to check in with this advisory body to see if there's anything missed, is of course to help revitalize downtown into vibrant places with a mix of uses. Engage the public, build on local strengths, focus on making this a desirable place that people want to visit, stay, work, and live. Look at the circulation network and make sure it's improved for both pedestrians and bicyclists. And to calibrate this development potential with community vision and market realities. That's always a tricky point. And that's where EPS will come into play to help understand the developability of the plan and what the market will bear. And then build on past and ongoing projects, everything from the Complete Streets Plan that I'm sure you're aware of that went before the City Council and that directly addressed what a road diet would look like and what other sort of right-of-way improvements might be helpful in fostering a more inviting downtown. So the advisory committee, like I said, their purpose is, they met for the first time, and their purpose is to guide the overall process, to help develop visions, policies, and regulations. They are expressly been selected to represent key members of the community and their interest, and to hopefully assist in reaching the public as well and inviting them to participate. We want to make sure that we get as many participants as possible. Let's see. There's just more of the structure. We can move forward. In terms of the feedback process, we have community members, we have stakeholders. They feed into the overall process as we move forward over time. There'll be multiple opportunities for providing comment and feedback. So as we check in with this advisory board, there's going to be also subsequent community meetings, again, for yourselves and the community to be able to have an opportunity to share their views on the status of the project. Some of the topics that are going to be discussed during future meetings include the plan framework, including looking at public spaces and the streets in particular, refining the overall plan and the number of alternatives, the design character for downtown, and that will help foster the type of standards and guidelines that will be put into the plan, looking at the issues of traffic and parking, what will be the economic developability of this plan, and then reviewing the overall plan at the very end. It's all about engagement. And so, as I mentioned before, we're trying, as best we can, we're trying to empower the community in this planning process and invite them in to share their views so that they have a sense of not only understanding but ownership of the specific plan. This is an inclusive process. We've actually looked to add a few more members, one of whom will be a member of the disabled community to address ADA concerns. We're also looking to try to reach out and hopefully have a college-age student, preferably in their 20s or early 30s, be a participant of the advisory committee too, so that we have as broad range of a representation as possible. Engagement activities, everything from posting things online to social media updates, the meetings that we spoke to. We're going to have community surveys. There'll be a number of public workshops, pop-up workshops. You can imagine that we'll have pop-ups at community events, whether it's, say, the Strawberry Festival or 4th of July, where there are a lot of people that are there that can have an opportunity to learn about it. And these are just some photographs to show what we're talking about. And these were the discussion topics for the first advisory committee meeting. What are some of the key issues that downtown is facing now and in the future? What are the strengths of downtown, and what are their opportunities for improvement? What topics do you want to have more in-depth discussion on during future advisory committee meetings? And how can we help the community engagement? What ideas do you have for reaching out to the diversity of community members? And with that, I'd like to conclude and open up to any questions, clarifications that you may have.
Any questions? Sure,
that was a lot
you may ask a question.
You mentioned the college, you mentioned the disabled, you've got a lot of old people too.
There actually are, so I'm on the advisory committee, and that age demographic is well represented, including members, community partners who work specifically with the older age population. Really, nothing? Yes, we had a meeting in September, and if you go back one slide to the one with, okay, so I can give you just this is how it went. There's 4 questions there, and every member of the committee was supposed to answer all 4. We only answered 1 each. So there was plenty of comment and discussion, and I would say that many of the comments were entirely favorable for moving in the direction that we're going, and the key concerns were how it would impact driving downtown specifically, and public safety was a big concern because, as you know, people want to drive through the streets and get there quickly, but we also have to balance that with the current conditions, which are not pedestrian and bicycle friendly in the least, and we need to do some serious work around becoming more pedestrian friendly. And then the other comment that was repeated over and over again was what can we do, and how much faster can we simply just bring new businesses and new things, events, opportunities into downtown. And I think most if not everyone, was in agreement that we're all ready and just waiting for those businesses to make themselves known.
I had a question. Can Justin, can you go back to the slide that shows the community engagement portion for a second? So right in here. So do you already have a list or scheduled dates, times, maybe not places, on community engagement, public workshops, the pop-ups, things like that?
Not yet. We have a general schedule
Okay.
for the next basically year and a half.
Right.
For
That was kind of the
completing the whole
timeline you
project.
showed, right?
But we don't have specified dates. Roughly, you can imagine that the advisory committees would be held once every 2 months.
Okay.
And that there's key points where we have scheduled out for check-ins with the Planning Commission and City Council. And then, of course, we'll take advantage of any community activities for having those pop-ups, for example.
Yeah, because I remember when the Parks Department came and gave their presentation to us, there was a lot of feedback from the community, especially in my district, about, hey, we didn't know about this to be able to go. So I would just encourage that whoever puts these together, make sure that there's plenty of them and that they're well publicized. Because some of our folks don't have access to social media and things like that to get notifications. So I don't know if we're talking about maybe a direct mailer to addresses and things like that. Something that might get them the word out a little bit better. Thanks.
And we'll definitely be making updates to you all at the Planning Commission as we go along as well.
I don't see any additional questions, so thank you. That was informative.
Welcome.
Okay, moving along to our one agenda item for this evening. It's a motion to approve the minutes for the September 3rd regular meeting. There's actually there's one thing that needs to be fixed. Under item number 1 for roll call, it said that both Commissioners Ed Acosta and Ana Kammer were present, and you both were absent. So that has...
But it says it twice, that's, yeah. It says we were present and then we were absent.
Yes, so we're going to strike out the first part and leave where it says you're present, and then leave the part where it says that you were absent. Were there any other changes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with that change.
I'll second.
I'll do roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Acosta? Hammer?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Tavares?
Yes.
Jones? Yes. Beach Olson?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Passes. Secretary, do you have anything else to report?
Well, get ready, y'all, because aside from the One Western Drive project that's coming to you in December, so's the cannabis regulations.
All right. And I think we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.